But by that time, another remarkable man had appeared on the scene. He was to become Schoenberg's great rival. This was John Logie Baird. When Schoenberg landed in England, Baird was working in the outskirts of Glasgow as an engineer with the Clyde Valley Engineering Company. It was there, in an attempt to produce industrial diamonds, that he blew up the Clyde Valley mains, and, as he recorded, difficult explanations followed. Baird displayed an exceptional flair for inventing things. There was the Baird patent undersock. He installed electricity in his own home. He tried the soap business with Baird's Speedy Cleaner. And he built an aeroplane which did, for a few moments, fly. On June the 23rd, 1923, an advertisement appeared in the Times, Seeing by Wireless.
Inventor of apparatus wishes to hear of someone who will assist, not financially, in making working model.
The inventor was Baird. The year was 1923, when the wonders of the age were still aviation and wireless.
This is 2LO.
The Atlantic had been flown, but only twice. The British Broadcasting Company had been born, but only just. At a time when there were wireless sets in perhaps one home in 1,000, Baird had set out to experiment in seeing by wireless, no less. His working model, which he built in an attic in Hastings, consisted, in his own words, of
an old tea chest served as the base to carry a motor which rotated a circular cardboard disc cut out of an old hat box. It was held together with glue, sealing wax, and string.
Inventing absorbed him totally, as years later a colleague recalls.
He had the typical inventor's outlook. He was inclined to be absent-minded, and as evidence of that I can recall the time that I was traveling to Germany with him. We were on the Golden Arrow, and I went into his compartment to chat, and I saw him reclined on the seat, apparently asleep. And I looked down at his feet, and I saw an enormous bulge over the top of his shoe. And what had happened, he'd put his socks on the wrong way round, but it hadn't disturbed him. And he was completely oblivious to the fact that I was in that compartment, and I was nearly an hour sitting there patiently waiting for him, and although he'd opened his eyes, I wasn't even existing. He was just absorbed in some particular thought, obviously television.
Baird used as his basis a type of disc devised 40 years earlier by a Polish inventor, Paul Nipkow. The Nipkow disc had a number of holes around the edge, arranged in the form of a spiral which scanned the image. Baird's disc consisted of 4 spirals, each of 5 holes rotating at 200 RPM. The image it produced was made up of just 5 lines, but it was a television picture of a sort and transmitted a few feet across a room. Early in 1924, a visitor wrote in the Kinematograph Weekly,
I myself saw a cross and the fingers of my own hand reproduced by the apparatus. The images were quite sharp and clear, although perhaps a little unsteady.
A little unsteady, certainly, but they were at least pictures, however crude. Surprisingly, they caused little excitement. A few lines appeared in the Daily News in January 1924, and there was a brief, uninterested reference in the Radio Times of February the 15th to
J.L. Baird, who has succeeded in transmitting the outlines of objects.
In March 1925, Gordon Selfridge, Jr. put Baird and his apparatus on display in his store, announcing on the posters,
We know that our friends will be interested in something that should rank with the greatest inventions of the century.
The journal Nature was more cautious.
Mr. Baird has overcome many difficulties, but we are afraid that there are many more to be surmounted before ideal television can be accomplished.
There were, indeed, more than even Baird himself realized. Nevertheless, he worked on for 6 intensive months, and then wrote in his diary,
One Friday in the first week of October 1925, everything functioned perfectly. Normally, the doll's head came through as a white blob with 3 black blobs for nose and eyes. But suddenly the head formed itself with what appeared to me to be almost unbelievable clarity. I had got it. I could scarcely believe my eyes and felt myself shaking with excitement. I was a happy man that night.
On January the 26th, 1926, Baird demonstrated his original television apparatus to 40 members of the Royal Institution, who squeezed into his attic room, a few at a time, in evening dress. Baird used as his models his two ventriloquist dolls, known as Suki and Bill. Afraid other inventors might steal his idea, Baird invited no outsiders, only the representative of the Times newspaper, who he felt would add dignity to the proceedings. By now, his partner in the newly formed Baird Television Company was talking of television as practically out of the experimental stage. But a member of the Royal Institution wrote afterwards,
"It would be an error of judgment to put it on the market. The apparatus as now developed gives a crude image, which is not even physically pleasant to view."
Nevertheless, in August 1926, Baird Television was given an experimental license by the Post Office and began advertising their televisors for sale. Baird himself told the press that he was
taking steps in the direction of having a broadcasting system for London, expecting to start next year.
He followed this up with a flurry of eye and press-catching demonstrations.
December 1926. Baird demonstrates noctovisor images from a darkened room using infrared rays.
June 1927. Baird sends pictures by wire from London to Glasgow.
February 1928. Baird transmits pictures by shortwave radio to the United States and also sends pictures to the liner Berengaria in mid-Atlantic.
August 1928. Baird gives demonstration of television in Copenhagen.
In fact, in the 5 years since 1923 and his first 5-line image, Baird's system had improved only as far as 30 lines. But he seemed unworried by the problems of improving his crude, flickering picture. What he did desperately want was BBC support and the use of BBC wavelengths to establish a national television service. The man who set out to get them for him was Sidney Mosley, a journalist and the author of a book, Money Making in Stocks and Shares, a large part of which had been written on Southend Pier. Mosley attacked. In September 1928, he wrote to the BBC,
"I wish to protest at once against the unfair attitude which the BBC appears to be adopting towards television."
The attack on the BBC for doing nothing about television continued through 1928. The directors of Baird Television announced,
"In the opinion of most who have witnessed demonstrations, the apparatus warrants broadcasting facilities being accorded."
On June the 22nd, Baird Television had issued a series of advertisements, "Television for all. Practical television is here," implying that television was about to start on the air. The BBC, entrenched in Savoy Hill, remained unimpressed.
The advisors of the BBC believe that the Baird apparatus not only does not deserve a public trial, but has also reached the limit of its development owing to the basic technical limitations of the method employed.
By their reference to the method employed, the BBC were pointing out that Baird's television system was purely mechanical. It scanned pictures by a mechanical method of discs and not electronically. So Baird and the BBC argued the case for mechanical methods. But already a patent had been filed and accepted in the United States, a patent for an electronic method filed by the Russian emigre from St. Petersburg, former pupil of Boris Rosing, Vladimir Zworykin, who had now gone to work for the powerful Westinghouse company.
But I was keeping after my boss all the time for permission to work with television. So finally, after several years, I was giving the permission to do it. Now was the work I was looking for a long time. So I put all my efforts in this thing. I worked days and nights practically. And after about a year or so, assembled whole system, including the cathode ray pickup tube, which I called iconoscope, and cathode ray receiving tube, which I called kinescope, from Greek words.
Needing more money for research and development, Zworykin arranged to show his pictures to a senior Westinghouse executive.